I watched my husband's mistress smirk as she told me I wasn't invited to the city's most exclusive charity gala. What she didn't know, I was the mystery VIP donor they'd been waiting for. Tonight, she'd learned that underestimating the simple wife was her biggest mistake. If you've ever been underestimated, this story will show you how quiet strength can be the most powerful revenge. Stay until the end to see the ultimate comeback. Hit subscribe now. My name is Elizabeth, and for 3 years I've been married to Benjamin Carter, one of the city's most successful businessmen. When people see us together, they always wonder what he sees in me. I'm not glamorous like the women in his circles. I don't wear designer clothes or expensive jewelry. I prefer my garden to fancy parties, books to business meetings, and quiet evenings at home to loud social gatherings. Benjamin used to love that about me. When we first met, he said I was refreshing, genuine, different from all the superficial people in his world. He proposed after 6 months, saying he wanted someone real by his side, someone who would ground him. But 3 years into our marriage, I could feel him slipping away. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The business trips stretched longer. The conversations at dinner grew shorter. I told myself it was just the pressure of running his empire. Benjamin had built his fortune from nothing, and maintaining that success required constant attention. I understood that. What I didn't understand was why he seemed embarrassed by me at social functions. He'd introduce me briefly, then find reasons for us to separate. I'd end up standing alone while he worked the room, and I'd go home feeling invisible. That's when Sophia entered our lives. Sophia was everything I wasn't. Tall, stunning, with perfectly styled hair and a wardrobe that could fund a small country. She was Benjamin's new business partner, brought in to handle the social aspects of his company. She had connections, she had charm, and she had Benjamin's attention in ways I hadn't seen in months. At first, I tried to like her. She was polite enough when Benjamin was around, complimenting my simple dresses and asking about my garden with what seemed like genuine interest. But I noticed things. The way she'd touch Benjamin's arm during conversations, how she'd lean in close when showing him documents, the private jokes they'd share that left me feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. The truth hit me 3 weeks ago, during what would become the most humiliating afternoon of my life. I was in my garden tending to my roses when I heard the sound of expensive heels clicking on our stone pathway. Sophia appeared around the corner looking perfectly put together as always, in a sleek black dress and diamond earrings that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Elizabeth, darling," she said with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." I wiped my hands on my gardening apron, suddenly aware of how I must look with dirt under my fingernails and my hair in a messy ponytail. "Not at all. Would you like some tea?" "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something." She perched carefully on the edge of my garden bench, making sure her dress didn't wrinkle. "It's about the Grand View Children's Hospital Charity Gala next Friday." I nodded. I'd heard Benjamin mention it in passing, though he hadn't said much about it. Sophia's expression became what I can only describe as mockingly sympathetic. "Well, the thing is, it's going to be quite an elegant affair. Very sophisticated crowd, you understand. Lots of important business connections for Benjamin." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Okay." And Benjamin and I were discussing it, and we both felt that maybe it would be better if you didn't attend this one. She tilted her head like she was explaining something to a child. "It's nothing personal, of course. It's just that these events can be quite overwhelming if you're not used to that level of society. All the politics, the conversations about business and investments. Benjamin mentioned that you're more comfortable with quieter settings." The words hit me like physical blows. Benjamin said that he's just being protective really. He knows how uncomfortable you get at these big social events and he doesn't want you to feel out of place. She stood up, smoothing down her dress. I think it's sweet actually how he wants to shield you from all that pressure. I sat there, in my garden surrounded by the flowers I'd nurtured with so much care, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. I knew you'd understand. Sophia's voice was sugar SW sweet poison. You're so sensible, Elizabeth. Not everyone could handle being married to someone like Benjamin. It takes a special kind of person to be content with a quieter role. After she left, I sat in that garden for hours, as the sun set around me. I thought about our marriage, about the woman I used to be before I became Benjamin's simple wife. I thought about all the times I'd made myself smaller to fit into his world, all the times I'd stayed quiet when I had opinions, all the times I'd accepted being overlooked and underestimated. But what Sophia didn't know, what nobody in Benjamin's circle knew, was that I had a secret. A big one. For the past 5 years, since before I even met Benjamin, I'd been living a double life. Under the name E. Sterling, I was one of the city's most generous anonymous philanthropists. The money came from an inheritance my grandmother left me, carefully invested and grown over the years. While everyone saw me as just a simple wife with simple interests, I'd been quietly funding children's hospitals, scholarship programs, homeless shelters, and community centers. I'd always kept it secret because I believed that true charity should be done without seeking recognition. I didn't want people to treat me differently because of my money. I didn't want Benjamin to marry me for my wealth instead of for me, and I certainly didn't want to become one of those society women who used their giving as a way to climb social ladders. But that night, after Sophia's cruel dismissal, I made a decision that would change everything. I walked into my study and opened the locked drawer where I kept all my E. Sterling correspondence. There, among thank you letters from hospital administrators and school principals, was an elegant invitation I'd received 2 weeks earlier. The Grand View Children's Hospital cordially invites our most generous patron E. Sterling to serve as the guest of honor at our annual charity gala. Your unprecedented support has made the construction of our new children's wing possible, and we would be honored to finally meet the person behind such extraordinary generosity. The same gala that Sophia had just told me I wasn't sophisticated enough to attend was being held specifically to honor my contributions. The hospital that Benjamin and Sophia thought I couldn't possibly understand the importance of had been almost entirely funded by my donations. The society that had dismissed me as too simple was about to discover exactly who they'd been underestimating. I spent the next week making careful preparations. I called the hospital director and confirmed that I would attend, but requested that my identity remain secret until the official announcement. I made appointments with the city's best stylist and personal shopper, and I arranged for something that would make an entrance none of them would ever forget. The morning of the gala, I woke up to find Benjamin rushing around our bedroom, getting dressed in his finest tuxedo. He barely looked at me as he adjusted his cufflinks. "I'll probably be quite late tonight," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Big event at the hospital, very important for the business." "The charity gala?" I asked innocently. He paused for just a moment. "Yes, you know how these things are. Lots of networking, very formal. You'd be bored." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Of course, I'll probably just stay in and read." He kissed my cheek absently and left without another word. An hour later, I watched from our bedroom window as a sleek car pulled up to collect him. Sophia stepped out, stunning in a silver dress that hugged every curve. She kissed his cheek and slipped her arm through his as they drove away together. I smiled to myself and began getting ready. The transformation was remarkable. The stylist had chosen a breathtaking yellow gown that flowed like liquid gold, elegant without being ostentatious. My hair was styled in a sophisticated updo that showed off the simple but expensive pearl necklace I'd chosen. Professional makeup enhanced features that I'd forgotten could look so striking. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized, confident, powerful, beautiful. The limousine I'd arranged arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. As we drove through the city toward the luxury hotel hosting the gala, I thought about what was waiting for me there. Benjamin would be playing the role of successful businessman, probably with Sophia by his side, acting as his unofficial hostess. The city's elite would be mingling over champagne, discussing their contributions to charity, while having no idea that the woman they'd dismissed as too simple to join them had made their entire evening possible. The hotel was magnificent, lit up against the night sky with red carpet leading to the main entrance. I could see photographers positioned strategically, security guards checking invitations, and well-dressed guests streaming into the ballroom. Through the limousine's tinted windows, I watched this world that had never made space for me, knowing that in a few minutes everything would change. My driver opened the door, and I stepped onto the red carpet. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as heads turned to see who had arrived in such style. Cameras flashed as photographers tried to identify the elegant woman in the flowing yellow gown. I walked slowly, confidently toward the entrance, very aware that every eye was on me. I heard whispers following in my wake. Who is she? I don't recognize her. She must be someone important to arrive like that. Inside the ballroom, the scene was exactly what I'd expected. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables decorated with white flowers and gold accents. The city's most powerful people clustered in small groups, wine glasses in hand, discussing business and social politics. At the front of the room, a small stage was set up with a podium where the evening's presentations would take place. And there, near the bar, stood Benjamin and Sophia. Benjamin looked handsome in his tuxedo, but tired in a way I'd been noticing more and more lately. Sophia was radiant beside him, her silver dress catching the light as she laughed at something he'd said. She had her hand on his arm in a gesture that seemed both casual and possessive. They hadn't noticed me yet. Nobody had recognized me. In this setting, dressed like this, I was completely transformed. From the simple wife they all knew, I was anonymous again, but this time by choice and with power they couldn't imagine. The hospital director, Dr. Patterson, was making his way around the room with nervous energy. I'd spoken with him on the phone many times over the years, but we'd never met in person. He kept checking his watch and scanning the crowd, clearly looking for someone. I approached him with a gentle smile. Dr. Patterson, I believe you've been expecting me. He turned and his face went through a series of expressions as recognition dawned. Relief, surprise, and something that might have been awe flashed across his features. Miss Sterling, is it really you? It's really me, I said softly. Though I think it's time everyone knew that. Dr. Patterson's hands were actually shaking as he led me toward the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice carrying over the crowd, if I could have your attention, please. The room gradually quieted, and I felt rather than saw Benjamin and Sophia turning to look toward the stage. My heart was beating so hard I was sure everyone could hear it, but my hands were steady, and my voice was calm. Tonight, we have a very special guest with us. Drive. Patterson continued. For the past 5 years, our hospital has been blessed by the generosity of an anonymous donor who has preferred to remain behind the scenes. This person has funded our new children's wing, our pediatric research program, and countless other initiatives that have saved and improved thousands of young lives. I could see Benjamin now, His brow furrowed as he tried to understand what was happening. Sophia looked bored, probably wondering why the evening's program was starting so early. Tonight, this remarkable philanthropist has agreed to step forward and allow us to properly thank them for their extraordinary contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Miss E. Sterling. The applause that followed was polite but confused. Most of the guests were still wondering who this E. Sterling was and why they should care, but as I stepped forward into the spotlight, I heard a sharp intake of breath from somewhere in the crowd. Benjamin had recognized me. "Thank you, Dr. Patterson," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "And thank you all for being here tonight to support such an important cause." The confusion in the room was palpable. I could see people turning to whisper to each other, trying to place me near the bar. Sophia was staring at me with her mouth slightly open, clearly struggling to process what she was seeing. "Many of you know me as Elizabeth Carter," I continued. "Benjamin Carter's wife. What you don't know is that for the past 5 years, I've been honored to support children's health care in our city through anonymous donations. I've always believed that true giving should be done quietly without seeking recognition or praise." The room was completely silent. Now, I could have heard a pin drop. But tonight, after being told that I wasn't sophisticated enough to attend this gala, I decided it was time to step out of the shadows. I let that sink in for a moment, my eyes finding Sophia's shocked face in the crowd, because sometimes the people who are underestimated the most are the ones working the hardest to make a difference. The applause that erupted this time was different. It was thunderous, genuine, filled with surprise and admiration. People were standing, clapping, not just for my contributions, but for the revelation itself. As I looked out over the crowd, I saw Benjamin pushing through the throng of people, his face pale with shock and something that might have been shame. Dr. Patterson took the microphone again, his voice warm with emotion. "Miss Sterling's contributions have totaled over $15 million, making possible not just our new children's wing, but our research programs, our community outreach, and our scholarship fund for underprivileged families. She has literally saved countless lives, and she did it all without ever seeking recognition. $15 million. I watched that number ripple through the crowd, saw the calculations happening behind people's eyes as they reassessed everything they thought they knew about me. I saw business associates of Benjamin's looking at me with new respect. Society women who had barely acknowledged my existence now trying to catch my eye. And I saw Sophia standing, frozen by the bar, her face a mask of humiliation and disbelief. Benjamin finally reached the front of the room as I stepped down from the stage. For a moment, we just looked at each other. 3 years of marriage, and he was seeing me clearly for perhaps the first time. "Elizabeth," he said quietly, and I could hear the wonder in his voice. Why didn't you tell me?" "When?" I asked, simply. "When you were working late every night, when you were too embarrassed to have me by your side at events like this. When would have been a good time to mention that your simple wife was funding half the charity work in this city?" He flinched like I'd slapped him around us. People were maintaining a respectful distance, but I knew they were listening to every word. "I never meant," he started. "You never meant for me to feel invisible," I interrupted gently. "You never meant for me to feel like I wasn't good enough for your world, because that's exactly what happened, Benjamin. And your business partner made sure I knew it." I saw his eyes flick toward Sophia, who was now being pointedly ignored by several people who had been fawning over her earlier in the evening. The social dynamics had shifted completely. The woman who had played hostess was now clearly an outsider, while the wife who had been dismissed was revealed as the guest of honor. "I want to apologize," Benjamin said, his voice rough with emotion. not just for tonight, but for everything. I lost sight of who you are, of who we are together. I got caught up in appearances and forgot what really matters. I nodded, accepting his words, but not absolving him yet. I need time to think, Benjamin, about us, about what I want my life to look like going forward. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations. People who had never bothered to really talk to me before were suddenly fascinated by my thoughts on everything from healthcare policy to investment strategies. I found myself enjoying the discussions, realizing how much I'd missed having my intelligence recognized and valued. Sophia disappeared early in the evening. I heard later that she'd made some excuse about feeling ill, but everyone knew the truth. Her position as Benjamin's partner, both professional and personal, had become untenable the moment my real identity was revealed. As the night wound down, I stood on the hotel's terrace, looking out over the city lights. The yellow gown flowed around me in the evening breeze, and I felt transformed in ways that went far deeper than just my appearance. Dr. Patterson joined me outside, still beaming with excitement. Ms. Sterling, I can't thank you enough for tonight, not just for your years of generosity, but for allowing us to finally honor you properly. Thank you for giving me a reason to step into the light, I replied. I think I've been hiding long enough. He nodded thoughtfully. What you've done tonight took real courage. Not everyone would have had the grace to handle such a situation with such dignity. As I rode home in the limousine, still in my beautiful gown, but now wearing comfortable shoes, I reflected on what had changed. I was still the same person who preferred quiet evenings and garden work to loud parties and business meetings, but I was no longer willing to be invisible. I was no longer willing to make myself smaller, to fit into other people's expectations. The house was dark when I arrived. Benjamin's car wasn't in the driveway. He was probably still at the hotel, dealing with the aftermath of the evening's revelations. I walked through the rooms that had been my sanctuary for 3 years, seeing them with new eyes. This was my home, but it was also the place where I'd hidden myself away, where I'd convinced myself that being overlooked was the same as being content. Tomorrow there would be decisions to make about my marriage, about my future, about how I wanted to use the platform I'd created for myself tonight. There would be interviews probably and requests for appearances and donations. The quiet anonymity of E. Sterling was over, but maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. I changed out of the yellow gown and hung it carefully in my closet, but I kept the jewelry on. In the mirror, even in my simple night gown, I could still see the confident woman who had walked into that ballroom. A